So let's bring in our guest tonight. He's the returning champion to the program. He's a data guy through and through. He hosts of the College to Canton podcast and RotoViz Radio, formerly of Mojo. We had him on last year. We're going to bring him back now. Let's talk to our good buddy Travis May. Travis, man, how the hell are you?
Doing all right. Glad to be on the show and just talk some 2024 NFL draft and prospects. And I guess I used to deny that I was a data guy for a little while, because when I first jumped into this space, I definitely wasn't really that first and foremost. I was more of like a film kind of approach to things. But as I kind of gained some experience and really gained an interest in pursuing data analytics as like part of my career, I don't think I can lie and just say I'm not a data guy at this point. So
yeah, you got to own it. You got to own it at this point.
Got to lean into it. It's fine. I'm team both, by the way, in the films versus analytics debate. But I'm a data nerd. That's fine.
About halfway through the season, I messaged Shane. I said, as soon as we've got time after we get through this, I said, we're getting Travis on. But one of the things I look forward to the most as we were going through the season was your QBR model. And I was just fascinated by the movement of it week in, week out. And, it started with guys like Shadur Sanders and everything up near the top, and they kind of piddled out. But it got to the end where Jaden Daniels, the quarterback at LSU, who just won the Heisman Trophy, deservedly so this past week, just a massive, just head and shoulders above everybody else in your model. Talk to us about how your QBR model works and what we can kind of get from it.
Sure. I mean, where this came from is for the past year and a half or so, I've been building out this sports stock market idea for Mojo. And so I had been, tracking player prices and career long projections for all these players. And, week to week, we'd see some different action with people coming in and buying and selling stuff. And I wanted to create like a quick and easy calculatable model that I could essentially use as like, guardrails for myself to make sure that my own process in terms of like what goes into the pricing was matching up, as well as to, hey, is the action make sense with where they're probably projected to go with draft capital wise, a few other things. But I wanted to just build like something quick, 15, 16 different variables into one model that could help kind of project, expected draft capital. So I created a simpler proxy version of what I'll do in the postseason anyway, that I could just update weekly and get a better idea of like, okay, where are these profiles really trending every single week, and not just quarterbacks, but running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and not for work, but just for my own kicks and giggles, other defensive player models too. But the passing side takes some volume metrics, but a lot of efficiency metrics, and piles them all into one score. And the average for FBS quarterbacks is anchored around 50. So like an average quarterback score will be 50, and like almost like perfect elite type level score will be around 100. And if you're, Iowa's quarterback, you'll figure out a way to have a negative score. But Jaden Daniels essentially just broke it. Like I've done this for a few years now, and he just broke it. Like he's at 135 to end the season. Like, and it's because it's comparing all these variables to every other quarterback in the sport. And so it kind of scales to this particular season's level of play. If for example, the COVID season efficiency was crazy off the charts. And so like, if we compared that to this year, the scores would look better, but this compares it to just this season to help, get rid of some of the noisy mess that happens when you try to compare players from different eras to one another and things like that. So, kind of gives us a good idea of where these players rank analytically speaking. Simple enough.
So, yeah, no. I think it's a good explanation. I want you to break down further a couple of the potential first round picks, I guess, in this draft from a quarterback perspective, how they did in your model, what kind of trepidation you have, right? I mean, we've seen Caleb Williams have a couple of those games that didn't go so well. People were starting to, get worried. Drake May just declared for the draft. People are still high on guys like JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix. Where do they kind of fit in, and what's your opinion, kind of quick and dirty?
Sure. I mean, like with Drake May, this year actually was not great. I think a lot of people didn't watch a lot of UNC football this year, and so you might not have kind of realized that Drake May struggled for a good portion of the year, especially early on. And so he actually, among the potential first round draft picks in this class, had the worst kind of analytical profile of like the top 6 or so that kind of are in the mix, which is surprising to some, I think. But in all reality, like comparing his profile this year to last year, he was like number 1 or 2 or 3 at worst, basically all last season by the same measure. So when a quarterback has a season like that already on the resume in like year 2, I'm much less concerned about a slight deviance from that result. You've already proven to me that you can be an elite prospect. And so if it's less than perfect because 2 or 3 bad games are dragging a season down, I'm not as concerned. He finished like fringe, like top 12 in the country, which is still not bad, right? And so, especially in a season where we saw quite a few quarterbacks just get off to ridiculous starts that kind of amped up their profiles even down the stretch. So Drake May had really the only concerning marks because he wouldn't, if this was his peak, analytically speaking, it wouldn't really project. He wouldn't really project to be a first round quarterback. But guys like JJ McCarthy, he kind of dropped off a tad down the stretch. Michael Penix had a few rough games, but even those guys were still top 6 or 7 in the country by this particular quarterback model. Caleb Williams had a couple of down games, still 5th overall in this model. And then Bo Nix, number 2, Jaden Daniels, number 1. And I think those 6 are the ones that we're really looking at to get early round capital, at least seem to be the locks to get that kind of range of capital. So I'm not really concerned, analytically speaking, with any of these guys. I know a couple of them are older, a couple of them have health issues, but I think there's a really good shot we see 6 guys come off the board in the top, 64 picks. I'm not necessarily sold on the fact that we'll have more than even 3 first-round picks, but I like the profiles of the top 6 and a few others that are intriguing.
Last thing on the quarterbacks I want to talk about. We talk about the Senior Bowl pretty much every week here. There's 3 quarterbacks that have accepted invites so far. Mm-hmm. And I know Spencer Rattler has not been kind on the model as I've been kind of tracking that this season. I have reasons as to why I think that is, but talk about the him as well as Joe Milton, who just accepted an invite to this week, as well as Michael Pratt from Tulane, who accepted earlier.
Absolutely. So Joe Milton actually kind of started slow and was less than perfect, had some really poor decisions in early weeks throughout the year. And so he was in like the 20s, 30s in terms of where he ranked among Power 5 quarterbacks most of the season. And a couple late season games kind of helped his profile overall. So he finished actually 20th in this particular QBR model. So that sounds like it's like, okay, 20th, that's not bad, but it's actually behind guys like Graham Mertz. So it's still like, it's not like he was killing it by the numbers that seem to matter when projecting quarterbacks. But what he has going for him is he has that rocket he can chuck the ball over them there mountains, which is nice. But can he do so accurately? After like 6 years, I still don't think I have the answer to that. And so I'm not really confident he gets decent capital whatsoever. There's going to be his fanboy section that just sees the arm strength and really pumps him up and says he's day 2 worthy or first round worthy. I even saw like a former scout pumping him up just like last week. I'm like, guys, no, sorry. I'm not gonna lie to you, So, and then Spencer Rattler, he actually did not finish strong. He was 30th among Power 5 quarterbacks, which is a far cry from what he was, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. Analytically speaking, it looked like, hey, if he follows this trajectory, he's on first round pace. Like he and Sam Howell were supposed to be like the 2022 first round picks. We are so far removed from that, aren't we? So he has questions when it comes to pressure. He has questions when it comes to a lack of upside in any regard other than the way that he kind of spins it. Looks pretty when it comes out of his hand, but by the numbers, it's kind of gross. Like he's had a couple of decent halves against good teams. Like he had a couple, like a good half against Georgia, a good half here and there, but he just can't seem to put it all together. So I'm not sure he's going to go very early. Michael Pratt, though, is fun. I was kind of doubting him for quite some time, just honestly. But among G5 quarterbacks, he was top 5 by most meaningful measures that you want to throw out there. So really impressed by him down the stretch, even if it wasn't with a bunch of volume Like he's not gonna, he was never gonna be in the Heisman mix because he was never. Well, he played for Tulane, but also he just was never gonna have the volume because they don't play that way. He doesn't chuck the ball 40 plus times a game. He doesn't run the ball 20 times a game either. But he's a good game manager that should be on an NFL roster. But if this is as strong as the senior ball crop at quarterback gets, that's a little concerning, considering what we've seen in the past.
I'm not unconvinced that if Rattler had average offensive line play, he would have been a lot more efficient this year.
Yeah.
But
that would
we can't go back and fix that now, can we?
No, definitely not. But it seems like he's come a long way in terms of like just growing up. And if you listen to him in interviews, he seems like he's a better teammate than he might have once been. But yeah, I agree that there were offensive line issues, but he just never put it all together, and so that's a problem.
Like, speaking of offensive line issues, so Travis, I'm bringing this up now. You mostly shared this more in a league chat that we're in together for our pinnacle of Devy Fantasy League, but I know you have taken a look at QB sack rates and versus like pressure rates, and you've talked a little bit in there about how sacks can be turned into a quarterback stat. I want you to talk about that a little bit, and if anyone's jumped out to you, and then I got to give you a little platform to talk Shedeur Sanders and the I don't know, pop culture tool that Deion and Shedeur have been this year.
Sure. I mean, just up front, like with sacks, I think people are coming around to the fact that quarterbacks can kind of own responsibility with sacks. I think that's just kind of a given. Like when you watch football, like, man, he probably shouldn't have taken that sack. He didn't need to take that sack there. But how do you quantify that? Like, how do you measure that? And so when you really rip through the data, look at offensive line quality play from a player to player basis, and where sack ownership really comes from, in terms of like allowed pressure rate of a collective offensive line unit or a certain side of the offensive line. Like I don't have access to a bunch of data that can make it really fun. But NFL teams actually have the spatial tracking data where they can really kind of dig into where sack ownership comes from and where it lives, and how to assess quarterback play, kind of looking at like a 4 or 5 piece matrix of like where it happens in the backfield, where the blown pressure was from, and things like that. I just don't have all the data to do that, but tried to create some kind of proxy where I created a model that tried to account for the percent of a sack that can be attributed to a quarterback, or the probability of a sack happening on any given play anyway, that could be attributed to a quarterback. And so I built out a model that kind of adjusted for a few variables, like the overall total dropbacks, allowed pressure rate of the offensive lineman in front of him, built-in variables like time to throw, the actual pressure percentage, some other things to kind of build out a sack over expected probability model, and learned a whole lot about like where both college and NFL passers might be a liability in terms of the sack and sack avoidance game. But just to kind of put some names to the numbers, and I won't get into a bunch of the rates here, but like why I think I'm not super high on Riley Leonard as a passer, but why I think a lot of people are really into Riley Leonard is that he's an elite sack avoider. So like for instance, like his pressure rate at Duke this past season, I know it's a smaller sample than normal, but his pressure rate was over 40%. So over 40% of his snaps, he was getting pressured, which is actually top 20 in the wrong way in the country, right? You don't want to be facing pressure over 40% of the time. But even so, he only took 9 sacks at all, and his pressure to sack rate was under 11%, which is ridiculous. Like, to put it in perspective with like somebody who still has sack issues today in the NFL, Sam Howell's pressure to sack rate is consistently above 25%, and Riley Leonard's was around 10 or 11, and that's pretty consistent throughout his career as well. So like, if you can avoid sacks despite the pressure and adjusting for offensive quality in front of you, like the offensive line issues that can be had at a place like Duke, if you can show that you can be the opposite of a liability, perhaps a plus side, because you add value with your legs and avoid sacks, you avoid negative plays. One, your expected points added profile is going to be amazing, like on a per play basis. and you're not going to be an issue. You're not going to bring the offense down. You're not going to be the reason why drives end. Like that's why he was really good. That's why prior to this season, like Bo Nix was actually really underrated. He was really good at that, even though he didn't have to really face pressure this year. But like there are just certain players who, when you adjust for key variables, you can see that they avoid sacks at an elite rate. And there are some players that bring it upon themselves.
Yeah.
And so by extension, I think that we could get into the Shedeur thing, but
well, I just want to open it up in case you wanted to go on your soapbox against Shedeur Sanders.
Sure, and it's not really against Shedeur. He was so funny. The whole situation was hilarious just to kind of follow this year, because like this hype, the 3-0 thing, and everyone's like, they're just the next best thing, and that people legitimately betting stupid amounts on long odds for them to like win the actual national championship. and it's just like, guys, oh man, this is so sad. I hate to break it to you, but this is like smoke and mirrors. And it was, and they fell apart and went 1-8 down the stretch. And that was largely due not just to the offensive line's fault, but it was actually in many cases Shedeur's issue. Whether you want to point to his time to throw, which actually did improve in the last few weeks because he was chucking to get rid of it. Or you want to talk about the fact that he just is horrible at avoiding the pressure, where he just kind of like is not great at pocket manipulation that shows up consistently. Or if you just want to dig into the numbers, when we talk about the offensive line play in front of him, people wanted to hate on the offensive line like it was the worst one in the country. There were at least 25 to 30 offensive lines that were objectively better at both running or like rushing and offensive, like pass blocking, than Colorado, like 25 or 30 among FBS teams, and several P5 teams that should have been better. But people wanted to heap on this blame and just never address the fact that Shedeur had a ridiculous pressure to sack rate. He took way too many sacks. I mean, like I know that the sack volume was amped up because they ran a crap ton of plays too, but like 50 sacks on the year is pretty horrific. And when his pressure percentage wasn't great, it was like 36%. Average for FBS teams is like around 30-31%. So he actually wasn't like crazy far off, like outside like a normal distribution of like expectations for his pressure rate. But even when he'd face pressure, he still took sacks at an alarming rate, well over 25%, like upwards, like close to 30% for the majority of the season. And it's just like one play in particular. I can't remember which game it was, but he took a sack for negative 21 yards on 4th down and tried to chuck it and did not get the ball back to the line of scrimmage. So it was like a grounding penalty. Like it was like this ridiculous like reversed punt type play where it basically went backwards like 30 yards because of him just refusing to get rid of the ball. And that just was like, man, that summed up his entire season right there. And so I just, there's so many excuses that people want to throw around for how Shedeur's season went, how Colorado's season went. But man, he didn't get like any of the blame for like most of college, like in most of all college media. It was like, oh, Shedeur's still amazing. He's perfect. He's Deion's son. He's going to be a 1st-round pick. Like, you guys are drunk. Like, that is not what's happening. So, like by any measure, I don't know what I'm looking at, but yeah. So there's in summation, there are players who are a problem. And when it comes to the sack game, and unless something changes drastically, he's not even going to be a day 2 pick because of that issue.
There's a tape right there. I love it. I love it. It still amazes me that like the 5th highest watched game this year was a Friday night game between Colorado and Colorado State. Just blows my mind.
Yeah, I think it was like the Saturday late game, wasn't it?
No, it was a Friday night. It was like a 9 o'clock kickoff on a Friday night.
It was Friday. I see. It all blends together because
Or was it Saturday night?
I don't even know.
It doesn't matter.
All I know is I never went to sleep before like 2, just because of my the job this year. Tracking all these games and all the players and all the stocks and everything, and I'm having to track literally everything. And I'm like, guys, please, this is really going to overtime. What am I doing?
Like, please no. We don't need more of that.
I'm so tired.
Right. Let's move on from quarterbacks because we've spent enough breath on those guys, right? Not like even they're that important. No. But which position group is worse As we know it right now for the 2024 class, running backs or tight ends?
Oh, depth. Tight ends probably. Like it's Brock Bowers and JT Sanders, and then and then like a fullback tight end hybrid.
Cade Stover is probably number 3 at
like
this
a
point.
converted linebacker who could be fun. Like Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. Like could be fun. He's a Senior Bowler. Like I like him. But like Ben Yurosek, I actually was really high on him, and he just announced he's transferring. So I don't know, man. It's a bunch of like So if Luke Lachey somehow decides to go, like he could be that guy that rises up in round 2, like Musgrave did this past year. Like Musgrave didn't even hardly play, but he was just an athlete, and then he got the capital. That's like that. That would happen because Lachey is an Iowa tight end, and he's a monster athlete. But man,
They are.
Yeah, the depth is a problem, but the elite options at running back, we don't have one. Like I really like Trey Benson. I really like that Braylon Allen is a massive person and could throw around small vehicles when he was 17. But and there's several others that Bucky Irving is like hyper efficient. That's intriguing. But yeah, all the excitement is at quarterback and wide receiver in this class. So I think that's where we are. We're not in like where I live and where Shane lives with dynasty drafts and things like that. Like we're not even going to see a first round rookie draft pick for like at all for running backs. And the only one that's going to be remotely interesting really is Brock Bowers at tight end. So it's not the normal class in that regard. We could see like this could be as bad as the 2014 group, like with Sankey and Hyde and Hill.
Ooh.
Now we're assuming Henderson's going back to Ohio State. That's the rumor, right?
Look, he announced today he has not made a decision, so yeah. We'll see. But we'll see.
We need him to
he's got
this year, man.
I am not unconvinced that Marshawn Lloyd doesn't end up being the first running back taken.
Wow, that's a pretty hot take right there, man.
Yeah, I don't think he's
pretty smoky. That's yeah. I mean, and seriously, Trey Benson's really in the mix. Like right now,
Benson, if Henderson goes back, will be my RB1.
Yeah, Benson's like right now by the mock data, he would be running back 1 without Henderson there. So like you said, the listeners were ashamed of how many mock drafts they've read. Guys, I've got a database that I just live in, and that has over 200 mocks in it that I sift through like every day. So that makes you feel better. There you go. And Trey Benson is seriously like he's going to rise into fringe round 2 status because of even the noise that Henderson might be returning. But yeah, I like him, Allen. But after that, man, it's anybody's game to be that running back 3.
Has there been any trends in that mock draft data that's surprised you or been interesting here as of late, or even through the season, through the process?
It's been hilarious because nobody, like people that really follow the sport closely, nobody has any idea what to do with these tight ends. Like the total number of tight ends that ends up in some of these mocks that are like even like 7 rounds is like, hey, wait, that's not like a normal. We're not going to have 7 tight ends get drafted like in total, right? Like that's impossible, right? Really? And I'm like, man, no, that's not going to happen. Like we see more than that, like 12, 13, 14, something like that. But people don't even know whose name to put in the hat. There's like, I don't know, Eric All, I don't know, like Tyler Warren. Let's get hype on him. Like I don't know, and it's not like he's a bad player. It's just like this is a weird class for tight end. So that following that trend has been funny because it's basically like Brock Bowers, JT Sanders, and then people like just shuffle a couple of names around. They don't know what to do with late rounds. They just would much rather throw in other positions than that. So the longer scale, like or deeper drafts, people just kind of forget the position exists. Same with running back. They just like throw names around in a hat. They're like, this week I'm going to go with Devin Neal, or this week, I like Devin Neal, but like, I don't know, Blake Watson, why not? And I'm like, it's just weird following the trend because people clearly don't know what to do with the depth of certain positions. And conversely, like at defense, like people seem super, super confident on and have been kind of take locky on certain defensive players this year. So really fun just to kind of track some trends this year a lot closer than I typically do. Just to realize, man, there's a lot of take lock that really takes like 6-7 weeks or more to come off in certain mock drafts and throughout the year. And then when there's the depth issue, mock drafters like, I don't know, just they throw a dart and hit a name.
Like, it's fair. Look, in my 7 rounders, I've done that from time to time. You've seen it, Travis. So throw the dart.
Yeah, you just I mean, 256 picks, you're just throwing darts, right? That's
right.
I mean, it seems like that's what happens when you're watching the actual draft. So
yeah. Once you get outside like the top 80 picks, like, wait, you wide receiver from UT Martin? I didn't know that person existed.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. You start in 6th, 7th round, you start seeing guys get, corners get drafted from D2 schools, and you're like,
what is life?
Who?
Yeah.
And it's you feel like it's dart throws, but most of the time, what ends up being, and it's what we will end up, we'll say the word special teams at least. Like, that'll be one of the biggest words in our word bubble over the next 4 months is special teams. Because those guys on day 3, that when the team drafts them and you've never heard of them, that's why they're getting drafted.
Yeah. I will say the sexiest thing that people are more, just to be like not a negative Nancy, that's happening in the mock draft data is in the last like 60 or so mocks that I have in my data, we have 10 wide receivers going in the top 46 picks. That's probably not going to happen, but that just kind of goes to show like this class at the wide receiver position is really, really good. Like, so
it feels like we're saying that every year, and I'm just going to ask next about the wide receivers. I feel pretty good, right, about who wide receivers 1, 2, and 3 are. I mean, I feel like it's Harrison Jr., Neighbors, and Odunze. If that's not the top 3, then who is above Odunze at least? But who's the next guys after that?
The consensus right now, after those 3, and that's pretty much become the ironclad consensus top 3, is Marvin Harrison, like slated to be like the 2nd overall pick in the draft. Malik Neighbors appears to be a pretty solid top 10 pick projection. Rome Odunze is slipping inside the top 15 with consistency actually recently. And then Keon Coleman has actually been the wide receiver 4 by consensus since really like week 1. Like, people just saw the what he did to LSU's secondary, and they're like, oh, this is LSU. We should think that this is awesome that he's doing this against this amazing defense. No. LSU turned out to be one of the worst defenses in the country. And he is basically the equivalent of dunking on middle schoolers at recess. So I am not on team Keon Coleman being wide receiver 4. Like, his consensus rank right now in the mock data that I have is like 16th, like 15th or 16th overall, which is a little bit pricey when Emeka Egbuka is going 5-6 picks later by consensus, which just seems absolutely wrong. Like, if they just if Egbuka was just healthy this year, it wouldn't even be a conversation, because going into the year, and I think where we're probably going to land inevitably is that Egbuka is actually a top 3 wide receiver in this class.
If he's in this class.
Yeah, but I think he's going to be, because I think he's going to realize, oh, there's wait, I've been mock drafted in like 99% of mocks, and all my actual grade is first round from the people that matter. I think that, a lot of, I'm not sure. I know some people even just last week were waiting on their committee or board grades to get back to them to see what like the league says they should be. So maybe Egbuka says he's a 2nd rounder, and he's like, no, I'm not. I'm going to come back and be Chris Olave and be a top 12 pick next year. Maybe that happens, but I think he's still a top 5 at worst, probably draft capital wise in the class. So I would come out, man. Just get that guaranteed money. Like, Smith-Njigba missed this whole year and was still like pick 21 or whatever it was. So I think that's worst case for him.
No, that's fair. The receiver class is interesting for sure. Like you said, I mean, I think that depth kind of comes out. We kind of wrap things up, Travis. But I don't know. Give me a hot take or two. Like, what's something you think unexpected that's going to happen on draft day? Where we got a couple months to go here that people aren't seeing now, maybe something that you're seeing, or just a guess that you have that you think can play out here the next couple months?
I'll give you a few then. How about that? I think we see 7 wide receivers go in the first round.
Jeez.
Yep. I know that is like blasphemy. Like, that shouldn't even be a conversation, right? I think it happens because I think we have
so I want to stop you there because I want to guess.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so we got Harrison Jr., Neighbors of Dunze, Egbuka. I'm going to go Worthy, Franklin, Coleman.
Yeah, those would be the ones. Yeah, because so I think you nailed it. And if it's not Franklin, it's Thomas. And if it's not Thomas, it's A.D. Mitchell. And if it's not A.D. Mitchell, it'll be some poor soul who just lost his job in the future by drafting Xavier Legette. And so, like, there's just so many options, like, to pick in that range, that somebody is going to get that 7th wide receiver, in that like pick 31, 32 range. And so there's just so many good profiles, and then Xavier Legette in that top 10 wide receiver range that it's going to happen. Like, it's an absurd class. Like, the production profiles are crazy. The athleticism is going to be awesome. It's going to be really fun to see. And I know a lot of the guys who have access to like the verified like on-field tracking data, like Xavier Worthy is a first round pick. And if he is, then like our floor is like 6. And if anybody else goes, then it's 7.
2004, last time that happened.
Yep. So let's get ready, because we need more and more wide receivers for the the QB3s who are going to be starting on NFL Sundays, as we've seen this year. Because when Tommy DeVito and Kenny Pickett and Zach Wilson and 47 other backups are who is throwing the ball, you need guys to bail them out. And this class is just stacked with those guys. And I didn't even mention like Devontae Walker. Like, he's, Jalen McMillan. Like, there's so many other guys that deserve early capital in this class that I'm pretty pumped. Oh, and the other thing, the other hot take maybe, Jaden Daniels is QB2 in the class. And when it's all said and done, and I'm not sure that's really hot takey at this point.
It's not.
So, like,
I think myself and Shane both have kind of like come on around to that.
Yeah, I think just his mobility, like, and he can thank Lamar Jackson for that, right? Because I mean, like, we needed to see that happen and him actually be like on an MVP level to believe that could happen again. And Jaden Daniels is going to benefit. He's probably going to be a top 6-7 pick, if not earlier. So. And I'm pumped to see it, because like I was really high on him early on in his career. Looked like he was going to disappear, and now he's back and put up the best season like ever. So I'm excited to see that for him and for just anybody who appreciates good mobile quarterback play, because it's a lot of fun. So, but beyond that, hot take stuff. Oh man, trying to give you a good one. Latu. Okay, let's go with Latu being a top 5 pick. I'm not sure if that's hot takey either, but
no.
Consensus. I think
I've been saying that since week 4, man. I mean,
that's fair. That's fair. The consensus for him is like fringe top 10, and some people think that the medicals are going to dock him, and that might happen. But all his raid stats are absurd, and I know that the whole UCLA front 7 was kind of crazy this year. They had 3 top 10 edge rushers for part of the year, the Murphy twins, and of course Latu, in terms of pressure rate and a bunch of other key metrics that edge rushers, it matters for edge rush projection. But he was just an unreal alien, so deserves that kind of hype.
In fairness, they all jacked their rates up with the one Colorado game, right?
It doesn't hurt when you play Colorado, but I mean, seriously, it was just every single week, man. So pumped to see what he does at the next level.
All right, Travis, man, we appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah,
and, this was good stuff, especially with all the sack rate stuff like that. It's something that nobody talks about, but they probably should. But tell everybody where we can find you and hear more about this stuff.
Yeah, at Twitter is where or X actually. X is where I share most of my stuff now, at @FF_Travis M. Yeah, so that's where you can find a bunch of the stuff that I share, including the model and a bunch of the mock draft data updates, and coming up soon, some fun stuff with recruiting I'm just going to dive into, because signing day is coming up. So yeah, but thanks again for having me, guys. It's always good joining the show, and yeah, I hope to talk to you guys here soon.
Yeah, and we should say you're going to be posting a mock draft up for us on Monday. So
I am.
look forward to that.
Yeah, just throwing a bunch of darts, learning from the best. Seven rounds of dart throws.
Love it.
No, it's gonna be a lot of fun putting that together, and it will be informed by a lot of the data I dig into, as well as my own thoughts and where I think some trends might be headed with this capital projection stuff. So hope all the readers can look forward to that on Draft Countdown.
Yep, I will look forward to seeing where the Bengals are going when your mock draft coming up this week, Travis. Man, again, thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Travis May, who is no longer invited to the show, thanks to his trashing of South Carolina's two top-rated prospects in this draft.
I'm trying to tell you that Xavier Legette stinks, but you don't want to hear it, Brian. So
he does not. I will not hear it. I will not hear it.